Okay, it's 9:28 a.m. on Tuesday, and still, let me look here. No, nothing from Congressman Jim McGovern. No, I wasn't waiting for an email. What I'm talking about is any kind of a reaction from him or any kind of a statement about what's going on in Venezuela. Now, for those of you who don't know, let me just give you a little bit of the background here. In Venezuela, yesterday, Juan Guaido, the duly elected president who was robbed of the presidency because the current socialist dictator by the name of Nicolas Maduro refused to step down. He didn't step down because he fixed the election. Now, the people know who really won. And 53 nations of the world recognize Guaido as the legitimate president of Venezuela. You remember Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, socialism, Joe Kennedy, Joe Foroyle, the people of Venezuela, Citgo. Remember all of that? Okay. All right. So they're trying to become a legitimate country. And the legitimate countries of the world are saying to them, hey, listen, you got to put this guy, Guaido, in, and you got to get rid of Maduro. Now, why didn't Maduro leave yesterday? People hit the streets after some members of the Maduro government said it's time for him to step down. People hit the streets, and then they were hit by tanks, put out by the socialist regime, run over in the streets. Now, these people were no different than the folks in Tiananmen Square, or how about our own who went on the Lexington Green and went to Concord and stood up against the British and said, no, we want our freedom, no. Well, Congressman Jim McGovern hasn't said a word about this. And as I said, as of this morning, but he didn't do it all day yesterday while it was going on. Now, why didn't Maduro leave yesterday? Well, he was on his way to the airport, and his friend Putin called him and said, no, you should stay. And you know what's strengthening his position? He's got 25,000 Cuban thug soldiers in Venezuela propping up his government. Cuba, Jim McGovern, not saying a word. Now do you get the connection? McGovern's not saying a word about this because Cuba's involved. Oh, and by the way, the only countries that are supporting the socialist regime in Venezuela are, North Korea, China, Russia, Iran. Yeah, there's a few others, but that's about it. Supporting a socialist regime. And Cuba is propping it up with soldiers. And Jim McGovern isn't saying a word about freedom fighters in the street. Actually, not even fighting, just taking to the streets and saying they want their duly elected president, and then tanks run them over, backed up by Cuban thugs. What's all over Jim McGovern's Twitter feed right now? Well, calls for Attorney General Barr to step down, but mostly calls for Medicare for all, socialized medicine. So let's see. Socialized medicine, socialist regime, Cuba, freedom fighters, not a word from Jim McGovern. What does that tell you? I mean, really, I used to tell people who said, McGovern's a communist or McGovern's this, and I used to say, oh, come on, he's just a radical leftist. No, he's a real radical. He won't say anything because Cuban soldiers are there, and he's got a strange love affair and fixation with Cuba. And of course, we know now he's a socialist because he stood with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when she rolled out the Green New Deal, which basically said if you're unwilling to work, you should still get paid. Do you need to know anything else? Yeah. All right. On tomorrow's show, we'll have more on this, plus A.G. Barr's testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee today. And we have kind of a silly but very popular Twitter poll. Go to @JimPolito on Twitter, and the question is, do you think that I would wear rubber clog-style Crocs? Apparently, all of my coworkers think that I would, and I have never worn them, and that's the truth. and that's the point.